to our session on managing the change to a hybrid workplace, brought to you by the new Leading Change and Organization Development Certificate at American University. We're so glad to see so many of you joining us here today. It's a real testament, I think, to the importance of this topic and also the popularity of American University's key executive leadership program. So really excited that you're here with us today. Again, my name is Marisa Sanchez. I am a consultant in organization development and change management. I've done consulting for, I hate to say it, almost 30 years. And I am focusing on mostly federal government work right now, but early in my career, I spent the first 15 years of my career consulting in the private sector, mostly financial industry, telecommunications, and some insurance companies. So I've got a good handle on both the private sector and the public sector, and doing lots of work in the federal government today, strategic planning, team development, change leadership, all those fun topics. I'm going to let Matt Minahan introduce himself for a few minutes, and then we'll introduce our agenda. So Matt.
Thanks, Marisa. My role here is as a director of this new program, the Leading Change and Organization Development Certificate Program. I've been on the faculty at AU for 10 or 12 years now, and teaching for about 20 years. And I do some work here at AU, and I'm a guest lecturer in several doctoral programs around the country. But mostly I'm president of our strategy and structure consulting firm, and have been since 1997. So I think we're coming up on our 25th anniversary, doing large scale 2, 3, 4-year projects having to do with organizational strategy, structure, business process, et cetera. Thanks very much for being here. Really excited about your being here and what we have to offer. And hopefully you'll be interested in joining us for our January start. What Marisa is going to do here is going to give you a sample of the kinds of things we're going to be working on, and a sample not only of what, but how it is we'll be working together in this Leading Change and OD certificate. Marisa?
Thanks so much, Matt. All right, I'm going to, there we go, advance my slides. So our agenda today, we want to introduce a few key concepts around change management and leading change. And as Matt said, we really in our program like to focus on application. So while I introduce some of these concepts, we're really going to have some opportunities for all of you to have some virtual discussion with each other. We'll be using the chat box primarily, because we really want to hear about your experiences and your insights as you're listening to these key concepts, and how you are thinking about applying them in your own organizations as you help your workforces adopt a hybrid workplace. So we're going to talk about the difference between change and transition. Transition being sort of that internal psychological process that individuals go through when they're moving from a current state to a future state, or something old to something new. So we're going to talk about what the difference is there. We're going to talk about the change formula, which is a nice way of creating a compelling business case for the change, and thinking about ways to overcome resistance to change. And our third topic will be around engagement strategies, and how do we help individuals get engaged in the change work themselves so they can work through the transition and be more likely to adopt the changes that we're all designing. And then we're going to do a little overview of the certificate program. So we want to give you a little taste, as Matt said, first about what some of the content might be and some of the conversations we might be having. And then give you an opportunity to hear a little bit more about the overall topics of the program, and answer or ask and answer all of your questions about the program. So we'll do that towards the end. All right, so we want to know who's on the call today. And of course, we can't have you all individually introduce yourselves. We have a lot of folks on the line. In the program itself, we do quite an in-depth introduction, so people really get to know each other well and begin to learn from each other. But if you would, just in the chat box, if you would type, and we'll probably see your name in the chat box, but if you would type the organization you're with, or at least the industry, government, consulting, healthcare, whatever it is, and your role. We'd really love to kind of see who's here today, but we also want everybody to see who's here today, because in our conversations, hopefully you will be learning from each other, hearing from each other, understanding what folks are thinking about the content and how you might apply it. So looking to see who's here, seeing lots of federal government, awesome. USAID, I saw HUD, MITRE, great. USDA, NIH, awesome. Seeing a few more, public health, workforce development trainer. State government, communications supervisor. All right, so lots of good, and of course, it doesn't surprise us, lots of folks from the government here in our DC, Maryland, Virginia area. We'll have a lot of folks from various agencies, I'm sure, in our cohort. Excellent, thank you for sharing who you are and where you're coming from. I think it's also really interesting to note, and we like to talk about this in our program, that while it's a program around leading change and organization development, people coming from lots of different roles to really apply change and OD to their particular role. So you don't have to be an OD consultant. You don't have to be a change management practitioner. All of those are really great skills to embed into whatever your current role is, whether that is as a leader, director, analyst, whatever it is. So we'll be looking forward to talking about that too in our program. So thank you for all the input there. All right, so let's get started. So when we talk about change management is really a set of activities that we use to help people move through what we call transitions. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But transitions are really a internal psychological process that individuals go through to let go of the old or the current state and move to the future. And managing change is all around the activities that we use to help people move through those transitions. So let's talk a little bit more about what we mean by change and transitions. So when we talk about change, we're really talking about, we think of it as external, right? So you are adopting some new technology or a new system, a new tool that you have to use at work. You may be adopting a new role or having to work in new ways, new processes, new policies, new ways of working. A new boss might be a change for you. A new office space might be a change. Personally, it may be a new house, a move, a new relationship, a new baby, lots of different changes, but those are all considered external. Transition is this internal process that individuals go through, again, to let go of the old and adopt the new. And there are several different transition curves. I selected two here to just demonstrate a couple. And the first one here is on the left-hand side, the nice curve, sloping curve is really based on the stages of grief. So when we lose somebody, passes away, we go through stages of grief. And we've adopted this, the organization development discipline has adopted these stages of grief to really apply to organizations, because when we change anything in an organization, many of us have to grieve a little bit what the old is to adopt the new. So as an example, let's say the change is new technology. We'll just take the first one on our list here, a new billing system, for example, that we're going to implement in the organization. So at first, people may be in denial. I'm sure you've heard this a lot. Oh, they're not going to ever implement a new system. They've been talking about that system for years. They've been talking about changing out, how we're doing our work. Never going to happen. Totally, whatever, not going to happen. Denial. Anger might be, hold on a second. They're changing the system. Why? Our system is perfectly good. I'm not going to change how I'm doing things. I'm about to retire in 5 years. I don't want to learn anything new. Kind of an anger. Apathy may be, I don't care, whatever, I give up, change the system. We're going to do whatever we're going to do, kind of just really apathetic view. Ambivalence is now, well, there are some negative things about our system that we probably could fix, but I don't know if the new system is going to be all that great. I kind of have to wait and see. I'm kind of ambivalent about the two, but I am at least open to looking at what's happening. Acceptance might really look like, this new system is definitely coming. It's going to be here. We're getting trained. And I think there might be some good things about it. Hope might look like this new billing system is actually going to decrease my workload, and I'm going to be able to spend more time with customers on the phone. And that's pretty exciting to me. And enthusiasm might be, wow, we should have done this sooner. This system is really helping us be much more efficient. And I can really focus on more value add activities as opposed to wrestling with that system every single day. So kind of an enthusiasm there. So that's one curve. One thing to remember is people don't go through this curve sequentially. So they may start somewhere in the middle and move forward, or they may start somewhere and go backwards. When the system doesn't work, people go backwards. They're not going forward. So there's lots of variables to make people move back and forth along this curve. Another curve that I want to share with you, somewhat different, is the curve on the right, which we call the honeymoon curve. It starts off much more positively. So thinking about a honeymoon, can't wait to spend the rest of my life with this person. That's the positive anticipation, right? This is going to be so great. Finally found the person that I want to spend my life with. Excitement. This is awesome. We're spending every day together. We're making plans for our future together. This is so exciting. I can't even imagine that this is my dream life. This is great. Then there's a little questioning. Well, you mean I don't get to decide what I want to eat for dinner every night myself, or when I'm going to eat dinner, or I have to coordinate my weekend plans? There's a little bit of realism setting in. Sometimes there may even be loss. I'm not going to be celebrating Thanksgiving with my family this year. Grandparents, my parents, my brother, my sister, they're all getting together. They're all going to be celebrating. I won't be there. I'll be with my partner's family. I'm feeling sad about that. I'm feeling sad that I won't be with my own family. And then hopeful realism. There's a give and take in this partnership, but I'm really finding, real joy in this relationship and in my life. So you see sort of the curve here. And again, we focus on more the organizational applications of this curve, where you might find individuals in the organization very excited about a particular change. And then as things maybe become more realistic, a little bit more questioning and understanding that maybe it's not going to be quite as rosy as we thought it was going to be. Now, the thing about these curves is that individuals are going through these transition curves all at their own pace. So as change practitioners, we really have to be thinking about where are various people on these curves as it relates to a particular change. And we have to help people move through these transition curves, regardless of where they are on a particular change. So it gets quite complicated to really be thinking about all the different movement that individuals, because this is really an individual process, how all the individuals are moving through these transition curves as you're introducing a change. So we want to talk about how this applies to our topic at hand, which is helping our workforces adopt a hybrid work environment. So just if you would think through yourself 4 different people or organizations on this curve. First, look at these 2 curves and plot where you might be on one of these 2 curves, specifically related to adopting a hybrid workplace. Where do you find yourself kind of on one of these 2 curves? Secondly, think about your team or a team that you work with or support. Where might that team be on one of these 2 curves as it relates to adopting a hybrid workplace? Third, think about the leaders in your organization. These folks are not only going through the process themselves of adopting a hybrid workplace, but they have to support the change effort in moving to a hybrid workplace. So where might you plot your key leaders in your organization on one of these 2 curves? And then lastly, thinking about your whole organization. Again, all these individuals in the organization are in different parts of the curve. But if you think about the organization as a whole, where might you plot your organization on one of these two curves? Okay, so in your mind, you've now plotted yourself, your team, key leaders in your organization, and your organization as a whole on one of these two curves. Now, I don't need to know where you plotted all of those folks on these two curves, but I do want to hear from you either live or in the chat what insights you might have gathered just going through this process of mentally mapping these four stakeholder groups onto these two curves and thinking about where they might be in their own internal transition processes. So use the chat box or raise your hand, and I think someone on our team can see who's raising their hand since I can't see everybody on the screen. And let's just see what you think about this process of mapping. Okay, so every stakeholder group is at a different stage, right? So you even just with the four, you see it gets very complicated very quickly because all four were in a different place. A wide disconnect between staff and leadership, yes. So I often have to work with leaders. Leaders, if you think about it, if there's a new change happening, they've already sort of approved that change, right? They're the folks that said, we're moving to a new office space, or they're adopting a new technology or tool or system or a new organization structure. So they've sort of gone through this transition themselves already. The people who, and so they're kind of off on another change already. We've got to really be thinking about everybody else who still has to move through that transition curve. So really good insight that leaders are often in different places from everybody else. Let's see, moving through here. Agree, we're all at different places. Leaders should be 2 steps ahead of their subordinates on the positive side. That would be helpful. That would be helpful. We do help leaders try to get there for sure. Let's see. Other interesting to know the time needed for the whole process. And people who are more entrenched in the organization are reticent to adopt change. You have people who, when I started working with federal government clients, I couldn't believe the number of people who told me, I'm retiring in 5 years. Don't ask me to do anything different. And at the time I was, in my 20s, and I thought 5 years seems like a long time to me, but not so much anymore. So yeah, people who are more entrenched, really very comfortable with their current state. Anybody want to open up the microphones and say anything aloud to folks or have a conversation about anything? Feel free to do that. Let's see, forced hybrid environment really broadened the views and understanding of how much work could really get done by teleworkers. Yeah. So wasn't it interesting? We did not go through any change management strategies when we all had to be working from home, right? It was just sort of, we had to do it. Very interesting change that takes place. Now we still had to, help people work through it. There are people who really were having a hard time in the beginning. We really had to be listening to people. We talked about making sure that there were still one-on-one conversations. There were still small teams getting together, that you talked about how people were personally doing with the change, right? And personally doing with the whole pandemic and having either kids at home or spouses and partners at home. So still lots of transitions that we had to help people with. But yes, the change happened automatically. Yeah. Okay, any other conversation here? All right, so this was introducing the idea of transition and that, again, that internal psychological process that we all go through when we are faced with a change. The next concept that I want to introduce is the idea of this change formula. How do we overcome resistance to change? And this formula suggests, and I like to introduce it sort of right to left, because I really focus on the resistance here. In order to overcome resistance to change, we have to have either very clear first concrete steps that people can take to move towards that future state. It's very clear, I need to do these things and they're easy and I'll do them. And it kind of helps me move towards that future state, helps me to overcome some of that resistance of just making those first initial steps toward that future state. Or we have a very compelling, inspiring vision. People get really excited about what that future state might look like. And so that vision of what could be really pulls people forward and over the resistance. Or you need high dissatisfaction with the current state. So if people are really unhappy with how things are, they may or may not need a super compelling vision. They just want to get out of that current state. They want to experience it differently, whatever that looks like. So when we're thinking about change and creating kind of our case for change, helping people overcome that resistance to change, we want to help people really either amp up their levels of dissatisfaction and kind of, really internally get that they are dissatisfied with the current state, or we want to really help them understand what the future might look like, or give them some very easy first steps to move forward. And we would do this as we're working with people to adopt a hybrid workplace. We want people to either in order to overcome this resistance, have a really clear vision or have some really clear first steps that they can move forward towards. And if the resistance is low, then these other elements are not quite as important. If resistance is low, people may be focusing on other things. Other things are more important. So we just move forward with the change. We don't have to spend a lot of time on really helping people either feel excited about the future or feel very dissatisfied with the current state. So again, moving into chat, I'd love to hear from you as you're thinking about this change formula. How might you use this change formula as you're thinking about developing strategies to help your workforces adopt a hybrid workplace? This is a change for them. It's going to be different. Many people have been at home now. It's a very different change from what it might have been a couple of years ago when everybody was at work and we're thinking, could we do hybrid? Now everybody's home, and how do we help them move to a hybrid? So what might be some of your thoughts here, again, in chat or in, in chat, or raise your hands so we can have a little conversation. Thank you for adding the question, Lamont, to the chat.
No problem, Marisa. We do have Dwayne who raised their hand. Do you mind if I unmute?
Great. Yeah.
Hey.
Thanks, Dwayne.
Great to see you. Hi, thank you so much. I just want to bring this into conversation because people have made the shift and the change, and now they put their life in a certain space. And now we're talking about going back and having this hybrid place. And now they're having to deal with the change of figuring out how they're going to do that, how they're going to work that out, especially single parents who had to navigate families and things of this nature, or just families in general with children who are still in middle school and those type of ages. Because now I have a person who's really having a struggle with going back to work because they've made their life where the balance is in making sure that the kids are okay. So I think there's a lot more now of resistance to even go back to hybrid at a high level. It has to be very minimal, in my opinion. So I wanted to bring that to the conversation.
Yeah, no, great point, Dwayne. Thank you so much. Yeah, this is the problem, right? We were working one way a couple of years ago, and now we're working in a completely different way. And you're right, we have fit our lives to work in this new way. And now we may be asked to go back or do something different. So if I could
add one more thing.
Yeah.
The other thing is, not only are we going back or we're trying to figure that out, but we're also looking at all the systems that are showing us that maybe we don't even need to be in those shared environments because we can get the work done. People were more productive. There was a lot of productivity that went up as a result of people having to be able to focus. And that's another byproduct of this hybrid workforce.
Right. Yeah. So people who are happy with the way things are, their level of dissatisfaction is very low. So to overcome resistance, we would really need to create a very compelling, inspiring vision of what that hybrid workplace might look like. and make it amenable to people who want to stay home for the majority of their time versus coming back into the office. I think I saw another interesting point on chat, which is what happens if these three elements are different for different parts of your organization. So leaders might be in one spot and staff in another in these three elements here, dissatisfaction, vision, and first steps. And so again, the change formula really has to be customized to these different stakeholder groups, because you're right, the change formula will not be the same for everyone in the organization. So we may need to, and this is where we'll talk about engagement strategies, but how we communicate about the change, how we involve people in thinking about what the change might look like, may be very different in different parts of the organization, particular leaders versus staff, but even different functions might think very differently about the change. And so that change formula is very much something that needs to be thought through and customized for each group that might have a different perspective around the change. So another comment here is that the change is forced on them. So we're going to talk about some change engagement strategies, because we know that when change is forced on people, what often happens is they may look like they're complying, but down the road, they're not really complying. You didn't really help them adopt a new way of working or a new way of thinking, because they never bought into it in the beginning. They were not part of the process, and they felt it was forced on them. So that we'll talk about that when we talk about change strategies. Yep. Yeah, employees feel like we're taking a benefit away from them by asking them to come back. Exactly. Matt, you had a question out here. Do you want to address that?
Sure. I think it's going to be a challenge for organizations to decide what is the work we can do virtually best, and what's the work that requires us to be there. And I think in thinking that through, organizations are going to need to make some judgments. And as I think you said earlier, Marisa, this is going to be really different function to function. You may be able to have the IT department work in one pattern, and the finance function work in another structure. And so creating a company-wide unified set of policies is going to be really tough. And I think facilitating that conversation and helping organizations differentiate between the kind of work that needs physical presence and the kind of work that can be done distributed is going to be a big challenge.
Mm-hmm. So as you all are thinking about this change formula, are there some insights that you have about how you might position this change to different parts of your organizations? As Matt said, different functions or different levels in the organization will respond differently. But how might you use these elements of the change formula to direct your communications and your engagement with different parts of the organization? Any thoughts on that? And again, happy to have folks raise their hand or type in the chat. Dwayne, are you raising your hand, or was that?
I am.
Okay,
yeah,
good.
I do
Thanks.
have a thought.
Yeah.
And I'm in training and development. And so one of the things that I get to do is actually, talk about these type of competencies at a lower level with the Foundational Leadership Program of USDA. But this idea of resistance, a lot of times people might think it's resistance, but they need more information. Sometimes people might think it's resistance to the change, but it's not so much. I would like to know if, in my way of making sure that we take this formula and actually put it into practice, it would be really helping people understand what resistance really is and not what they just think it is. So I think by having this formula really, spell it out for them, we can have a better, more robust conversation around resistance when people are not ready to change.
Yeah, thanks, Dwayne. There's a whole body of knowledge around resistance and the types of resistance. And so, yeah, some people might resist just because they don't know enough. They need more information. They're not really sure how this is going to work. what's going to be expected of them. They need more information. But actually, that's our biggest mistake that we often make, is we just think we need to give people more information, and then they'll say, oh, okay, I got it. And really, what we need to do is help people through these transitions. Most people are resisting because of those transitions, the emotional and psychological processes they're going through to let go of the old in order to adopt the new. So if we just give them more information, we're not really addressing the emotions. So I absolutely agree with you, Dwayne, that we need to be giving them information so they understand. But oftentimes, what I see is we make the mistake of just giving information, expecting that people will then say, okay, I got it, I'm on board. And
Yeah,
that
that's what
actually isn't
happens
addressing the issue.
that happens a lot with us, training. They say, okay, you need more information, so go to training. And it's not. You need more empathy, and you need to lead with your heart and not just with your head. So that way you can, talk to the whole person, and maybe they might get on board. And I saw in the chat, someone's talking about the return to work, and then the Delta variant came, and there's a lot of resistance around that as well. So people saying, okay, what's my work environment going to look like? How am I going to, wear a mask all day? We had to do that with our children when we sent them back to school, and they have to have a mask on all day. So what is that compounding along the way for their health and all these kind of different other things? So more information doesn't always satisfy it. It's like, okay, so how do you help me with my humanness? And I think that's important.
Yeah, great point. I've got somebody in here who said managers in their organization are not clearly articulating the vision of what's possible through the hybrid model. And yes, lots of different people, different demographics are going to be thinking about this quite differently. I think I've noticed that more of the folks who've been around for a long time want to go back to work. That's sort of how they're most comfortable with that, right? And others are not. So good point there. And you bring up another great point, Dwayne, which is change is constant. And so even though we're thinking about, okay, now we're going to move to this hybrid work environment, maybe not, because maybe Delta is going to force us to not move to the hybrid work environment. And so we're constantly looking at change in a very global context. Not global meaning, worldwide, but in its broadest systemic view, what is this change and how are we thinking about this change? Because it's not just a one and done. There's many, many changes. I think I see another hand up, Jason Taylor.
Hey, how are you? Another concept too that I look at when we talk about change is the differences between when you're dealing with employees that, and I hear this, the sentiments in some of the conversation already, is the culture and the climate, right? So a lot of times, in change, like as you mentioned, you have to take people through the process, and a lot of the resistance coming from the culture, right, is that there's going to be also a change in culture, and people are just comfortable where they're at. But as leaders, we have to be able to express and explain the difference, right? Because there is a difference between the culture and the climate, right? And oftentimes people think the climate may change, and it might, right? If you do change wrong, the climate will change, right? But the culture, expressing to them that what we're trying to go towards in this change is and speak to the cultural aspects of the change as well. I know where I work at, one of the biggest things for me and some of my other colleagues for when we work here is the environment, right? And we're in a change in our organization and even in my division areas. And one of the main things I keep hearing all the time, it's not going to be the way it used to. And we used to have fun and we used to be able to come to work. It's all surrounded about culture. And they're fearful that they're going to lose that. They already feel that, like you said, in this hybrid environment, that the social aspects of it is already being missed. So it's a very tough conversation. And during those tough conversations, leaders need to, that's where we step up and try to explain that and help them through this. Over.
Yeah. Thanks, Jay. I appreciate that. The culture is a really interesting piece. What I've noticed in organizations that have made that do change well is they anchor the change to their values and the culture that they hold dear. And so regardless of what those values are, if they can show that the change that they're adopting, the values are not only retained, but maybe they're even strengthened. So if your values are around collaboration, for example, and you used to have these fabulous collaborative workspaces in your physical environment, with electronic whiteboards that you're working on together and rooms where you can have mobile furniture and all that great stuff. And now you're all at home. Okay, but how do we then still capture the collaboration value that we have? What do we do? Do we, bring in collaboration software? Do we have meetings in a different way? But we still really anchor ourselves to the values and the culture. That helps us with the change. So we're not changing who we are. We still want to be collaborative, but it's going to look different because of our environment. So I think that you bring up a great point, that the culture is really something that we can use as a force for enabling the change and helping people move through the transition and feel like not everything is changing. I think it's really important when we talk about change in organizations to help people understand what's not changing, because we're always hearing about what is changing, but here's what's not changing. Here's what we're not going to change, particularly if it's our culture or our values or who we believe we are. And that's, I think, a real support in helping folks adopt new ways of working. Good conversation. I want to bring up this other point that I see in chat. Somebody says their organization is looking to automate processes. And while they're saying nobody's work is going to be removed, eliminated, reduced, whatever the right words are, they're still talking about automation. And what does that actually mean? And so words really make a difference here when we're talking about, and again, we'll talk about engagement strategies on the next slide. But what we communicate is so important, and we have to communicate in a way that we are making ourselves heard by the people who are listening. We don't want to talk, our language. We have to talk their language. People who are going to be impacted by the change. We want to be speaking in their language and not this kind of double speak that I think is being suggested here. It's happening in this organization. All right. Let's, my chat just went all the way to the top. I need to get down to the bottom here. Okay, let's move on to the next slide then. I want to introduce our third topic around change management, which is change management strategies. These are really categories of change management strategies that we use, again, to help people move through those transitions. So again, organizations change when the individuals change. Those individuals go through those transitions. So engagement strategies, and somebody had mentioned this in the prior chat, engagement strategies are engaging people who will be most impacted by the change and engaging them to define the problem, define what the current state is, potentially doing some current state analysis or really looking at what the problem is, as well as engaging people on what the solutions might be. So some examples of engagement strategies might be a working group, 5 to 8 person team who's really going to focus on a particular problem in the organization, really do some analysis on what might be the causes behind that problem, and be thinking about what solutions might support, removing, eliminating, reducing that problem. So working groups might be one. In organization development, we do a lot of world cafes or appreciative inquiry, very large scale, large group techniques where we're bringing a lot of people together all at once and having them really focus for a specific period of time on defining the problem, giving us their input on what they believe the current state looks like, and then their ideas for the future, their ideas for solutions. So engaging people, we know people are more apt to adopt change when they're part of the process, when they are a part of understanding why we're changing and what that change might look like. All the better, the more we can engage people. It takes longer, we know, but we get better results, better adoption, and we get better ideas and better solutions when we engage more people as well. There's that whole factor around getting more minds around engaged around the problem. The case for change is another set of change management strategies, articulating the case for change in ways that really resonate with the people who are going to be impacted by the change. So again, to the prior chat conversation about we're automating our processes, well, what's the case for change? If you're using the term automated and people think that means I'm being let go, that's not a great case for change. So articulating the case for change in ways that really resonate. As I was thinking about this, what always pops into my mind when I think about the case for change, and this is decades ago, I'm sure many on this call won't even remember this, but in Congress, there were several Congress people who were advocating simplifying the federal tax code. And they brought onto the floor just wagons full of paper, and it was the tax code. Like literally just printed out the thousands of pages of tax code. And it said, this is the problem. This has got to be simplified. You know, regular people cannot understand this thing, and we shouldn't expect anybody to understand this. So it was a very visual case for change. It was a nice way of just really letting people see, wow, that's a lot of complexity there. A vision and change strategies around vision is really creating a compelling and inspiring picture of that future state. You know, what could be the possible. Again, going back to this tax code example, a couple of years ago, I saw an article where somebody was suggesting that some percentage of citizens in the United States could complete their tax reform with just a two-sided postcard. You know, I mean, what a great vision is that? Gosh, it's only going to take me that little bit of time to fill out the back and the front, and I'm done. So what a great vision. So again, it could be that kind of a vision. It could be demonstrations, role plays, technology demo, a variety of things to really help people see what the future state might be. Communications are a whole other set of change management strategies. And really there's a whole specialty around change communications. But they need to be two-way, variety of forums to not only provide information, but to solicit feedback. We really want to have people be part of the conversation, not just being talked to about the change. So large town hall meetings where you can do some really interactive things, polling, small groups online, whatever it is to really get people talking about the change. Small focus groups, social media, all those kinds of things are great communication strategies to support people moving through the transitions. Resources is another set of change management strategies. And here I really focus on the time and attention of leaders to devote to the change implementation. As we talked about earlier, leaders are often through the transition curve and they're on to the next change. And we really need them to stick with us and stick with the whole organization as all of us go through that transition, those transition stages to adopt the new change. So of course we need, change project teams. That's one strategy of getting people involved and getting the right resources to build the future state, but also keeping those leaders engaged and communicating is really helpful. And then lastly, another set of change management strategies is just continuing to report against achievement of measures that we think show success. And I think here of sort of the traditional United Way thermometer, where you see sort of the levels increasing until you get to your target funding level, is certainly something that I use, or I often will use a dashboard, like almost your car dash or an airplane cockpit or something where you've got 3 dials and you're showing progress against the 3 major measures that show success of your change. And those are really helpful to keep bringing out and showing people we're moving, because change often takes time. A lot of these changes, I work on very large scale changes. They don't happen even in just a couple of months. So to really show people that progress is being made is a really important strategy to help them move through those transition curves. So a lot of information there about just categories of change management strategies. But again, I want to invite some conversation here as we go back to our topic of helping the workforce adopt a hybrid workplace, whatever that might look like in your organization. After hearing about some of these change management strategies, what insights do you have? What change strategies might you think about using in your own organizations to help people move to adopting a hybrid workplace? Would again love to see some conversation in chat or raise your hand. Okay, so we have a question in chat. What is better, a firm deadline to start a formal hybrid workplace or floating the date depending on circumstances? Well, I think that because we're living in this world where change is sort of as out of our control, a firm deadline may not be that helpful. You know, like I had a firm deadline a couple months ago. Everybody was going to be in the office September 15th. Well, that went out the window because our environment changed. So if it's a change that you think you can have some control over, then I think deadlines are helpful because it helps people prepare, and everything that you're doing is working towards those milestones. But I think for a hybrid workplace, it may or may not, be that applicable depending on, what we're seeing in terms of testing levels and all those kinds of things. Yeah, having a goal is good, but being flexible is also good. And I think, we've, if nothing else, we've learned over the past couple of years that we need to be flexible, even when we have a vision, even when we think we've got a future state we're working towards, it's got to remain flexible. We have to be able to live in some uncertainty and ambiguity and be comfortable with making decisions with just the information we have today, knowing that that information might change in the future. Great. Other thoughts, other insights, other ideas that you might have about using some of these specific change management strategies? Jay, I see your hand up again.
Yes, I look at case for change because just what you said, and whoever chatted just recently, thank you for that. But I think case for change for me is key. I mean, they all key, but for me, case for management in this hybrid work environment, because again, you're tying it to, in ways that resonate, that impact to the stakeholders. So you have to explain this whole picture, right? And oftentimes what I see is that folks are jumping to having a right answer, but not necessarily the right solution, right? Because we got to do something, but we don't make the case of why we're doing it, right? And what are those second or third level impacts of that decision? So the case of change is very clear, because if you don't get that right, when you're articulating that to your folks, one thing you don't want them to get is change fatigue, because they're going back and forth with the wind. Leadership needs to control that environment, that atmosphere, be intentional about what you're saying, but understand the environment and the atmosphere you're in so that you don't create a problem where there probably potentially wasn't one. Over.
Yeah, great point. We don't want to come up with a fabulous solution for the wrong problem. And we really want to understand the problem and understand why are we changing, and then come up with a solution. Otherwise, you're right. We tend to, as a society, kind of go to fix it quick. What's the solution? And we often don't spend a lot of time thinking through what is the problem, what are the causes of that problem, the underlying causes, not just sort of the symptoms, but the underlying causes. So yeah, thinking through that is really important.
Marisa, a little earlier up in the chat sequence, Carla Dancy Smith asked, how do we do large-scale events and do engagement virtually? That's challenging for us as practitioners to grow and change into. And I'm imagining there are lots of people on the call here who have confronted that themselves and have suggestions and ideas that they could share in addition to your insights.
Yeah, would love to hear how folks are doing this. I know I've joined several groups to just start to learn how to use some software that helps to engage lots and lots of people in a facilitated kind of a session. So, using Mural, for example, using some other, I'm not a big fan, but even Google Docs is something that people are using now, but would love to really hear, other ideas that people have for doing that. But there are lots of good groups that are just sort of serving as test beds and having people and training, environments for people to start to learn how to use these tools, because they're new to all of us. I don't know anybody who was really using them before a couple of years ago. Yeah, feel free to add tools or other large scale facilitation techniques into the chat. Yeah, using new tools, polling. I also wanted to jump on Dina's comment about agility needs to be part of the design. I am such a huge Agile fan. I really think that we need to be better at just starting some things and starting some changes with the mindset of we're testing, we're learning, and we're going to see how it works, and then we're going to refine it as we go. We're just in an atmosphere and an environment where change is just so constant that it's hard for us to say we're going to come up with a plan and spend months on a plan and then implement the plan. By the time we implement that plan, our changes might be completely different or have changed enough that the plan also needs to change, and then we're in constant planning. So I really love the idea of the Agile, let's just get something done that's valuable in a couple of weeks' time. Let's test it, let's get feedback. Let's scrap it if it's not working, or let's build on it if it is. So I think that's Agile is really, I think it's a great way to be thinking about change. And quite frankly, the Agile Manifesto, for those of you who are really into Agile and know that, I mean, it just really covers the change management set of principles. I just love it. So lots of good synergy there. Dwayne, the government seems to take too long to embrace new technology while the world has moved. Yes, I have found that some of these great collaboration tools are just not able to be used with various, firewalls and platforms in the government. I know lots of problems with MS Teams, even in federal government. We're really struggling. Need to figure out how to do that. Agreed. Hey, Agile Manifesto. Thank you, Lam. Slack, yeah, that's another great tool that people were certainly using before all of this, for sure, and using that more. That's a great one. Any other input we'll see on chat. All right, any other thoughts on these change management strategies and how you might use them in your own organizations as you're helping workforces adopt a hybrid workplace? Any last thoughts around this topic? So those were our three topics. I really wanted to then just open it up to see if there were any questions about these particular topics. Again, maybe about the change principles themselves or applying that to the hybrid workplace, or other ideas to share. Dwayne.
Yeah, I was wondering, have you thought, or how might we take this information and turn it into some small, micro learning opportunities to kind of create some engagement around this whole topic of change management? I know for me, I'm looking at how can I even make sure that low-level GS, 9s and below, actually understand what change management means in their realm, and then how it impacts those that are in the higher levels of federal government. So I'm just curious, has anybody thought about, like, how could we take this big topic, because I think it's a lot, in just the different areas that we anchored our conversation around, to bring it into a micro learning environment or a just-in-time learning environment to help people really wrap themselves around the concepts that create change management under, within the formula.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it is a big topic, and this is really just a snapshot. And I think there's a lot of thinking behind it. And you probably know more about this, Dwayne, than I do, but what I'm seeing in a lot of the learning and development arenas is really, you use the term micro learning, but creating like a one-pager, and then having everybody across the organization, or at least in a good chunk of the organization, read that one-pager and have conversation in their teams about how might we apply this, and have conversations across teams about how might we apply this. they're just snippets. And so part of me, because this is my field, I feel like, wow, how can you boil like all of this stuff down to a couple of one-pagers,
Right.
but I do think that I think it is helpful for people to look at things like a change formula or to look at a transition curve and say, how does that apply in our organization? How can we apply that? We don't need to know the whole body of change management and organization development and leadership development and all of those things that come together. But you can take it. And so I have seen some organizations really, but it's almost a corporate wide initiative or some large segment of the organizations that's going through that micro learning together, and then they begin to apply it. Because the one thing you don't want is for different parts of the organization to be learning different things, and then they've got different language and they're not able to really connect to each other. If everybody, for example, just saw one or two of these transition curves, and everybody in your organization started talking about, well, what am I going through? What are you going through? And what's our team going through? I think that would be a really interesting conversation. It would help people just with a little bit of knowledge really have some good conversation and maybe come up with some solutions for helping each other move through the transition. So I don't know, that's a great answer. I'm sure you know more about how to do this, but I think it's, you don't want to not give information, and yet there's a lot of information to give as well. I see Dina's hand up.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Dwayne. Can we unmute Dina?
Hi.
Hi, Dina.
Hi. So yeah, the kind of looping back to the question of that agility. I think many of us are from large organizations, and we know that timelines can be, impacted by the complexity, the matrices that exist, and so forth. Will we also be discussing strategies about how to, manage those timelines when you're working within such a large organization?
You mean in the certificate program? Is that part of the set of topics?
Yeah, is that going to be part of, are there going to be, strategy discussions about specific scenarios? And I'm not just talking about large as far as, employee number, but complex organizations where traditionally change management may be obviously negatively impacted by the many people who have to be involved in decision making, the many levels of communication and so forth.
Yeah, I think we will spend, and I'll let Matt go through some of the overview of the topics of the sessions, and you might see some things in there. But when we talk about change management, we'll do a little bit on the change portfolio. And I think this is a really important concept where you're looking at all the changes that are happening across the organization and connecting them to one another so that people don't feel like they're being, changed 100 different ways with 100 different projects. And you're also connecting those projects to particular points in time. So people feel like there are sets of changes happening. So I think one of the topics that we will cover in our change management session as part of the certificate program is thinking about change as a portfolio of changes. And the more changes we have in our organization, I think the more important this is because people quickly can become overcome with change fatigue when they feel like there are, 15, 20 changes coming their way. But if you connect those 15 or 20 changes to really a couple of things, maybe going back to our earlier conversation about culture and values or around strategic goals, people feel like, yeah, it's 15 to 20 projects, but I see how they all fit together and how they're all working towards where we're going. So that will be something that we address in the session on change. Now, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add or if you want to just defer till we talk about the topics in the session.
No, I would just say that, the days of any organization having one change underway are long gone. And so, so making sense of the changes is an important role for the communications function. And when you think about it as a portfolio, you have to figure out how does this change relate to that one, and that one to the next one, and that one to the previous one. And as you said, Marisa, the link to values, the link to culture, the link to environment, the link to business, whatever the link happens to be. These do need to have one or two unifying themes to help people make sense of them, prioritize them, and keep them organized in their own heads.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, do you want to move to the program overview, Matt? And I can move your slides here.
Sure, that'd be great. Thank you.
And again, if folks have other thoughts on our conversation here, feel free to keep them going in chat or raise your hand. Happy to continue the conversation.
So thanks, Marisa. We're a faculty of 3. Marisa Sanchez, you've spent the afternoon with her. Karen Parker Thompson is also on the faculty, and I'm the director of the program. Next slide. So this program is a 6-month program. It's a Thursday, Friday, once a month. So it's 12 days, 6 months on a Thursday, Friday, once a month. And it's really designed to help all the participants lead and manage change in organizations, to help build the competency needed to make change effective in organizations, because that's at the heart of all leadership jobs today. It's the heart of all organizational success today. You know, every year we say, you know, the world is facing unprecedented changes. And of course, right now, we're in another set of unprecedented changes. And 2 years ago, it was a different set of unprecedented changes, and 2 years before that. And so, you know, to bring up that, you know, that old overused saying, the only constant is change. And so we're interested in helping to build capacity for leading and managing change in the participants in the program. We're also building it around the Organization Development Network's Global OD Competency Framework, because it's a well thought out and well researched model for what people need to know and do in order to be effective in leading teams, leading change projects, and advancing organization development in their organization and advancing into those roles themselves. So it's great to see so many people from the federal government here. Lots of people from the IG function. I taught in the Key IG program for 6 or 8 years, and so I have a really good sense of what your culture is like. And so your people from the federal government are totally, I think, going to find this a comfortable fit. But we also have a particular fondness for people in the nonprofit sector. We've kept the rates as low as we possibly can do it, so people in the not-for-profit sector can join as well. Corporate people always welcome entrepreneurs, people from the social sector. And listen, this is going to be interesting, I think, for line managers, for HR generalists, business partners, and independent consultants. As I said, Thursday, Friday, once a month, January through June. We're designed this to start face-to-face. And right now, the university is meeting face-to-face. Depending upon the status of the virus in December, around December 15th, the university and the DC Department of Health will make a decision about the spring semester, and we'll abide by that decision. It's looking very hopeful that we'll be able to do this face-to-face. If we have to revert to making this virtual, we'll do what we have to do that. But no matter how we do it, it's going to be highly experiential, it's going to be rigorous, and practical things you can do in your job day to day to apply these issues to your work and to global issues as well. Will in person be attended? If it's in person, yes. We expect you to be there. It'll either be in person or virtual. We're not going to do a blended program here. And so it'll totally be at the mercy of the DC Department of Health and the university, assuming that the virus numbers continue to decline as they have, assuming that the university continues to do as well as it is doing already this semester in managing the COVID issues. we're expecting all of that to continue into the future and to be able to offer this starting, I don't know, third week in January of 2022 face-to-face. So what are we going to be talking about? Well, first thing we're going to be talking about is what is an organization strategy and why you need one, and how your organization structure, whether it's vertical or horizontal or matrix or regional or departmental, how your organizational structure is a critical variable in achieving your organization's strategy. Any success that any of us has as a change agent is derived from how we use ourselves. It's derived from how we present ourselves. It's derived from our ability to be persuasive. And there's a whole body of knowledge around use of self that we're going to be spending time on so that our participants can really deepen their impact in their workplace and have a good, clear understanding of what these concepts are and how they can empower themselves to be effective and even more effective in their workplace. An essential part of any change project today is groups and teams. And so we'll be spending some time on what is the theory behind team development? Are there stages of team development that we can predict? And how do I notice and recognize which stage and what do I do at each one of those stages? So we'll be talking about how to lead and manage groups and teams. Linked to use of self is our own cultural competency in navigating around these topics around diversity and equity and inclusion. What does it mean to be a social justice advocate? What does it mean to be an ally on these topics? What's going on in the workplace right now that makes these topics inescapable? And particularly for us as change agents, what stance, what position, what role can we take in advancing our organization's progress toward being a social justice organization, an organization that is inclusive and diverse and equity and equal, practicing equity and competence. We'll spend a couple of days on the action research cycle. This is how to collect data about what's going on in the organization, because all change projects need to be rooted in data. They need to be rooted in pre-data, mid-data, and post-data. And there is a science to collecting this data. There are tips and tricks and tools that a good change agent needs to know in order to be effective at doing that. And so this action research cycle will help you figure out how to get into the organization, how to enter the system, how to contract in the system for the work that needs to be done, the problem that needs to be addressed, the role that you can play, and then how to do the work, how to collect data from whom, by when, using what methods, and we'll talk about the different trade-offs among all the methods, and then how to aggregate the data. We'll give you a pile of data and you'll be able to work with that pile of data and figure out what meaning is in the data. What sense do we make of the data? How does the data relate to what the organization is trying to do? And then finally, how do you present it to decision makers and work with them to create a change program? And finally, when organizations are in transformation, there are roles and processes to help facilitate that change. And so we're going to be helping you think through what they might be in your organization, what role you might be able to take on during that process, and how that can make you and your organization more effective in the work.
Matt, I just want to say something about that action research bullet that you described. I don't want people to be afraid of our use of the word data. You don't need to know statistics or math or anything like that. When we talk about data, we're talking about things like collecting what people think about in the organization about the change, what they're thinking about how the organization, what the current state is, or so it's really, interviews, focus groups, surveys. It's not data analytics, those kinds of things that people are thinking, oh my goodness, I'm not the math type. It's qualitative, mostly qualitative data and quantitative, but really around organizational type data.
Right. It's things like what to observe in a leadership meeting. And what is that? What can you extrapolate from what you've seen in the leadership meeting? How do you conduct a focus group? And what should your role in a focus group be? And how do you make sure you collect the data from the focus group? It's going to be group interviews, one-on-one interviews. These are all ways we collect data. And listen, the occasional Survey Monkey survey, which you can construct yourself, can also be very helpful. You can work with your organization's IT or HR people to do a broad scale survey if you want to. But frankly, we have many more tools for collecting qualitative data than we have for collecting quantitative data. And depending upon the scale of the change that you're talking about, you'll want to select the right data collection tools. And most large projects need multiple tools in order to make that work for you and your organization and for your change team as well. That's a really good point, Marisa. Thank you. So we're going to be doing 2 or 3 or 4 more information sessions. Our next one is scheduled for October 28th. Karen Parker Thompson will be leading that one, November 18th and December 9th, and we'll probably do one in January as well. The program starts, so help me with the date here, Marisa, January 22nd, maybe? It's going to be
I can look that up.
It's going to be the third, I should know this. It's going to be the Thursday in the 3rd week of January. And I think that's the week of inauguration. No, it's a week of Martin Luther King. And if this were last year, it would be Inauguration Day. So I think it's January 22nd and 23rd.
I think the 20th is a Thursday, so 20th and 21st.
Oh, 20th. Okay, good. So the application deadline will be rolling. We've had a handful of applications received already. So there are 2 steps to this. One is apply and the other is pay. And we'll hold your seat until we've reached our 24 participant limit. So we'll have a rolling deadline. If we find out that the number of people interested is huge, beyond our capacity, we'll try to turn around another certificate starting in March or April and try to accommodate as many people as we can. I know that there are a bunch of people here from MedStar, and if you want to bring several people to this all at once, we'll do our best to accommodate that. And listen, if your organization, if you got 10, 15, 20, 30 people in your organization who you think would all be interested in this, we'd be certainly glad to come and customize something for your organization as well. So we've got lots of flexibility about this. The Key Executive Leadership Program which sponsors this chat and the program has huge capacity. And I've been teaching in the Key program, as I said, for 8 or 10 years. And our program staff just really has program administration down right. And so we can do this in multiple ways, depending upon what you and your organization needs. Laman has added several resources into the chat box. She's got a link to the web page, a link to the registration page, and you saw earlier her link to the Agile document as well. I think I've got nothing else to say here, but I'm certainly happy to answer any questions and take yourself. Yeah, maybe we can just see people and you can pop in, open your mic, and speak up about what you want to know.
Yeah, Matt, really quickly, we'd love to kind of end with a nice outro, if that's okay. Just wanted to give our gratitude to you both. And also, folks, we do have some time left until 4:30. If you have additional questions about change management and hybrid workplace or the certificate programs, please let us know. Otherwise, thank you so much all for joining and engaging with us for this info session today. There will be many more to come. We just want to share our gratitude to Marisa and Matt for such an insightful, engaging conversation. It has been a delightful experience. We're so excited excited for this new offering and know how invaluable it will be for our community at this time. And as a reminder, we will be posting every single resources that has been shared. So the presentation slides, recording of the session, resources, etc. And you will have a follow-up email as well. That's all for me.
Great, Laman, thank you. So maybe Marisa, we can stop sharing your screen and just gather with the 35 people who are here. And oh yeah, there's my contact information.
Whoops, sorry. I just
Sorry.
went right past it.
That's all right.
I'm going to put that back up.
Yeah, just so people have a chance
Yeah.
to, so
Yeah.
they can figure out how to reach us. If you have questions about the program, we can talk about them now, or you can write to me or call me. I'm happy to talk to you. There's my phone number, 301-625-0101, and my email address is just minahan@american.edu. So thanks very much, Marisa. So those of you who are still here, what questions do you have? What else can we talk about? And this could be about the program, or it could be about the hybrid workplace. It could be about the change models that Marisa mentioned to you. We'd just love to engage in a conversation with you about that.
Looks like Claire has her hand up. Can we unmute Claire Caldwell?
Sure thing. Thank you. This was really great to listen in on. And I'm sorry if I missed this in just what you were just most recently saying, Matt. My AirPods were coming in and out. What is the tuition?
$8,500, $8,500 for 12 days in the program.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Others?
You can either raise your hand or maybe even just take yourself off mute as folks are leaving and we have fewer people on the line.
Yes, at this point, we can manage a group of 25.
Hi, this is Tatiana. I am trying to figure out, I'm interested in the SES leadership in government,
Yes.
and leading change is one of the ECQs. Does that align with that, with the OPM experience?
We haven't done a crosswalk on that, Tatiana, because most of the key programs are really oriented toward the federal marketplace. Our program is oriented really more broadly than that. I'm very happy to give it a good look and circle back to you and let you know how well what we're covering lines up with the federal ECQs on that.
Yeah, that's a great question.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Other questions? Take yourself off mute or in the chat box if you're in a spot like with dogs and kids at home and don't want to take yourself off mute. The chat is.
I had a question for both of you. So
yes,
in your change, first of all, thank you for a very good presentation. Really appreciate it. In the change formula where you talk about resistance, how I was wondering if you could talk a bit more about how do you know when you have overcome resistance?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think a few things, and this is part of the setting up your success measures and understanding what success will look like for you. You know, I had a client one time who said, success for me is when everybody's now talking about this. We might not have even adopted it yet, but everybody's talking about it and using the language. And that could indicate that we're no longer resistant. We're now just really looking to build the change, whatever that looks like. So I think there's a number of ways of understanding how where you are on resistance. Another technique that I've used is, especially for very large scale change, is to do a very quick, a very brief, like 5 or 6 question poll. Do you think the organization's going in the right direction? Do you feel like you're getting enough information about the change? Do you feel like you have the tools and the knowledge, skills, mindsets to move forward on the change? So maybe just a couple of quick questions, and we would call them a pulse check. But doing that quarterly, across several hundred people can help you understand how you're moving and if you're overcoming resistance. So things like that kind of a very, very quick survey. You don't want to over survey people, but if it's like a 5-question that they know they can answer very quickly, can give you a lot of data, especially again, across a large number of people in the organization. So a couple of ideas there about, measuring when you've overcome resistance.
I would add two more to what Marisa has said. One is poll the management chain and ask people in their own departments to report out to what are you hearing, what are you seeing, what are people saying about this. And the second has to do with performance metrics. On the basic 3 performance metrics: timeliness, quality, quantity. How are we doing against our goals as we transition through the change? And so you would expect any change to have a decrease in some metrics while you're in the middle of it, but starting to see an increase is typically a good sign of reduced resistance.
Thank you very much. That's really, really helpful. Thank you.
Good. Mm-hmm.
Thanks
Sure.
for the question, Stuart.
Good one.
Good. Other questions? Questions or comments? Any insights that people have, also welcome.
I think we've worn them
Okay,
out.
maybe that's, yeah, good. Well, as Matt said, we have a few more information sessions coming up. We will be talking about different topics, not just change. So stay tuned. You might just want to attend the information sessions just to get that content and have conversation with others about that. Again, in the chat are links to the certificate program. I think there's a link to the upcoming information session. And you will get, I think, a follow-up email as well with all this information. So thanks again, all for joining us. I'm excited to have met you all and have a conversation, and good luck with your changes. Take care.
Thanks and goodbye.